Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel. And today it is 16th June 2026. So today we want to continue with our series of quantitative techniques, and in the previous video we had looked at the statistical data, and we had defined what data is all about. We had looked at a sample, we had looked at a population, why we choose a sample over a population, and so many things that we talked about in the previous video. Now, today what we are going to talk about, we are going to talk about the types of data, the types of data, the types of data. These are the ones that we are going to talk about today. So, without wasting more time, let's begin, and we start looking at what we have as far as data is concerned. Now, one thing you will understand from the definition of data, we said that data refers to the raw facts and figures which can be used to draw conclusions. So we know that data is going to be values. These are going to be values of a given variable, and these values are going to be measurements, or they are going to be observations. And these observations, of course, these are going to be measurements or observations that a given variable can assume. Now, we know that data is classified, or data can be categorized into two broad aspects. The first one is discrete and continuous data. That would be the first category. The second category is called the primary data, primary and secondary data. So those are the two broad classifications of data. Now, we want to understand each of these data types, and we'll be able to go through them and understand what they really mean in detail. So let's start by looking at the discrete data. Now, discrete data refers to the type of data, which is in the form derived from countable domains. Derived from countable domains. Derived from countable domains. Derived from countable domains, such as 0, 1, 2, and so on. Now, one thing that you need to understand is the fact that the descriptive values, they always assume to reflect a special values or specific values. Specific values, they represent specific values, or what we call the separate values. So I want us to look at what are some of the examples of discrete values, discrete data or discrete data. So we need to know some of the examples. Number one, we can get maybe marks scored by students, in an exam. Those represent discrete values. We can also have number of television sets, number of television sets, sold during a week. Maybe how many number of televisions did we sell in the week? It will represent the discrete values. We can also talk about the number of students in the lecture or number of students in the class. Number of students in a class. We can also talk about number of defects. If maybe we are in a production department, we can talk about number of defects. Number of defects in a batch of let's say 100 products. So you look at this in a sense that if you have grouped maybe these goods were produced in batches, we want to know how many of those items are defective, or which of them are spoiled items. And you can know that there is no way we are going to say that half of, maybe we say half of a product is maybe damaged and maybe the other half is right. So the other item will actually be a defective item. So if you are looking at the number of defects in a given batch for the goods that have been produced, we take even if the item has just a mere small scratch, we take it as if it's a defective item. The other that we can talk about is maybe the number of mobile money transactions. Number of mobile money transactions. Number of mobile money transactions per day. Because there is no way you are going to say I made maybe 2.5 transactions. There is no half a transaction. It's either full transaction or it's not. So that's why we give some of these examples for you to be able to understand. There is no way someone is going to ask you how many television sets have you sold today, and you say I sold 1.5. There is no way you are going to say you have sold a television which is just half of it. So those are some of the things. That's why we are saying that discrete values always assume specific or separate values, and they don't fall in a range. So the values, if you are to look at maybe the properties, of course there are those properties, I know they may not be examined, but just know they are properties of discrete values, discrete data. Of course, one of the thing that we've talked about, we've said that discrete values, the discrete values are countable. They are countable and finite. That's one thing that we can count, that let's say we've had 10 transactions, 10 mobile money transactions in a day. Maybe we've had a student scored 20 marks. So those are some of the things. Maybe we have 10 children or 10 male and maybe 20 female. So the number is going to be a specific number. So the other property that we have as far as discrete values are concerned, the discrete values tend to be the results from the discrete values result from counting and not measuring. So the results are coming from counting and not measuring. Because if you measure kilograms of sugar, you may find that you have maybe 4.1, 4.2, 10 kgs, 20 kgs, but you will have some decimals or fractions in terms of the measurement. But if you are counting something, you can't count the number of students and you say, I've gotten 20 students and a half. It will not make any sense because we don't have a half a person. So that's why we are saying these are special or specific values. They pick specific values. Then the other is that there are no values that exist. No values that exist between two adjacent. No values that exist between two adjacent. No values exist between two adjacent values. Like for example, if let's say I have 1 and a 2. If my count is a 1, then 2. We don't have numbers here, or the numbers that fall between 1, because if I'm counting, I start from 1, maybe 2, 3. So the numbers that are within the two adjacent numbers, they are not considered discrete values. They are considered continuous values. So you can have things like 1.1, 1.01. All these are not discrete values. That's why they are saying there are no values that exist between two adjacent values. That if I have 10, then 11, the numbers that exist between 10 and 11, the 10.1, 10.001, 10.002, there are so many numbers that exist within there, but they don't fall under the discrete data. They are continuous variables because they have fractions, they have decimal decimal places. Now, that's as far as the properties are concerned. But now I want us to look at something different. Let's look at maybe how the analysis and representation of the descriptive data is going to look like. The analysis and representation. How can we represent data that is maybe data that is going to be data that is discrete. Now, one, if we talk about maybe the description, the distribution. Now, the distribution, of course, when we are representing this, the discrete values can be in a distribution, the kind of distributions that are going to help us represent the discrete values are called discrete distributions. So they are discrete distributions, and the one is for countable, the one is for continuous. They are continuous distributions, as we shall look at them. Now, what are some of the discrete distributions? We have what we call the binomial distributions. Let me just call it dist-n, just a short form. Binomial distribution. We have what we call the Poisson distributions, or Poisson distributions. The Poisson distributions, and then we also have what we call the geometric distributions. So these are the distributions that we can use to arrange discrete values. So those are some of the things that we can talk about as far as the discrete variables are concerned. But what you have to know is that the discrete values are variables that come from the discrete variables. We shall learn more about the discrete variables when we start, when we define what a variable is. We shall be able to go through all that. We look at the quantitative variables, the descriptive variables, the continuous variables, and all other kind of aspects. So that's all that we can talk about as far as discrete values or discrete data is concerned. Now, I want us to look at the continuous data. Continuous data. Now, this is the other category. We've said that there are two categories. It can be discrete or it can be continuous. Then it can be primary data or it can be secondary data. So we need now to understand what we mean by continuous data. Now, continuous data, this is the type of data that may assume, this is the type of data that may assume any numerical value, that can assume any numerical value, that can assume any numerical value, that can assume any numerical value within a specified interval, within a specified interval. Within a specified interval. So for instance, we can look at the good example that we can use. We can look at the probability axioms, the axioms of probability. We know that the probability of any event to occur always falls within this range. That the probability can't go below 0 and it cannot also exceed 1. So the implication is that we don't have negative probabilities, but we have values between 0 and 1. You can have 0 0.5, 0 0.01, 0 0.9, but you can't have 1.1. These ones, they don't exist. So these are values that can exist in a given range. You can see that, remember, in the discrete values, we said that we don't have a value that is between existing, or a value that exists between adjacent to countable numbers, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we are finding that from 0 to 1, there are so many numbers that are within there, which form part of the continuous variables. So those are some of the things that we have under the continuous variable, meaning these ones, we don't have specific values, and we can have decimals, we can have fractions, we can have any number. So this one, they pick different numbers. So let's look at the examples of continuous data. The first example we can have is the height of the student. The height of students. Because you know, someone can be 1.6 centimeters, or can be 1.6 meters, or 2.2 meters, 3 meters, depending. Someone, if you're measuring in foot, someone can be maybe 5 foot and maybe 3 inches. So that's one of the examples. We can have also age. Someone can be 12.5 years, maybe 12 years and 6 months. So we can have the age of students, ages of students. Then the other one, we can have maybe time taken to process a loan. Application. Time taken to process a loan application. We can also have things like temperature. Temperature in a given city or in a given area. Temperature in a given city. Let's say Kampala. We can maybe have the weights, or a weight of a bag of maize. Because when they're weighing, you find that different bags have different weights. It is a one bag, but it weighs different kgs or kilograms. So those are some of the examples that we can think of. Maybe the other thing that we can look at is the representation and analysis. How do we represent continuous data? The analysis and representation. analysis and representation. Analysis and representation of continuous data. How can we represent continuous data? Now, the representation, of course, it goes into how these items are going to be arranged. We can talk about maybe the first instant, we can talk about the distribution. The distribution, we said this one follows under a continuous distribution. And examples of a continuous distribution, we have what we call, we have the normal distribution, we have the exponential distribution, we also have the T distribution, student T distributions. And of course, when it comes to analysis, how do we analyze the continuous data? Most of the times we use what we call the t-tests. We can use the t-tests. We can use ANOVA. We can use regression. We can use correlation. So some of these things, we are going to look at them in broader details, but you have to understand that some of these aspects, you need to understand them just by knowing what they are at the start, that when we go into deep understanding of the qualitative techniques, we are going to look at most of these things. Some of these things, like the ANOVA, we can use it when we are using some statistical softwares like FSSBES, or when you're using Stata. So these are some of the different softwares that are available for statisticians. So let's now look at the other category, which relates to primary and secondary data. So primary data. So what is primary data? So primary data, this is the type of data, that is, this is the type of data that is directly collected, or observed, for the first time. By the researcher. For a specified or for a specific purpose. Collected or observed by the researcher for a specific purpose, depending on what the researcher wants to find out. And one key thing that you need to note is that it's an original data. It's original in nature, because you are collecting this information for the first time, so it is original. It exists in its original nature or first form. For example, if maybe let's now look at, maybe I give a very live example, maybe from because we have a society called FSSBES, FSSBES Building Society. It's more of a savings and investment company or organization. So I want to give a fair understanding of what primary data is all about by just giving you something that is very live from our association or our organization. If maybe we are trying to carry out a survey as the management team of FSSBES Building Society, and we want to carry out a survey about members certification or certification on the society loans, So if we want to make a study about whether members are satisfied with our loans that we provide to them or that we provide to other people, then we are going to make sure that we collect first-hand information. We gather the information from the members themselves, and we collect it maybe through using questionnaires, maybe through interviews. We shall look at how do we collect data, but those are some of the things. But one of the best method of collecting primary data is through questionnaires and interviews. So if we collect this information for the first time, then it becomes what we call a primary data. But now, if we are carrying out maybe a survey on unemployment rate in Kampala, then we look at maybe the information from WBOS. Maybe we get WBOS report about unemployment level in Kampala. WBOS is just the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. So if we get the reports from WBOS, then it means what we have done will be a secondary data, because we are getting information that was already published. So for the primary data, the information is just available for the first time. It has never been presented, it has never been published anywhere, even online it's not there. But we are researching that information from the very first time, and the researchers themselves, they engage in finding out that first hand information by themselves, depending on a particular topic of study. So there is a very big difference between the primary data and the secondary data. But now we want to understand what would prompt us to carry out primary data, getting the data for the first time, yet we can actually get the information online. So we need to look at what are some of the advantages of primary data as opposed to getting the information from maybe the different publications that have been made already, or from getting information from the textbooks that are already available in terms of what we call the literature review and other sorts of things. So why do we go for primary data? So let's look at the advantages, or what we call the merits. Advantages of primary data. Now the first one is that the data collected is original, meaning it is in its own original form. So since it has been collected for the first time, So the other is that the information obtained is unbiased. The information obtained is unbiased because we collected this information from the very first people, like we reached out to the people themselves. Leave alone when you send, if maybe I have typed questionnaires and send them through email, or I contact people. Of course, you find when people are tired, they give you biased information or they give you wrong information about a certain topic that you are trying to research about. But you have reached to the ground and met these people who are going to give you the information. You have interviewed these people, you have assessed their moods. If you see that maybe the person is in a different mood, I have asked a question and it is maybe the question is too personal, the person doesn't want to respond to the question, you can be able to tell that this person is actually going to give me an information that is already biased, basing on what or on how you have seen the person you are interviewing or you are collecting the information from. So the information we are going to receive is going to be unbiased. Even when you get a biased information, you can easily tell and you put some doubts. You may include it or exclude it, or you can compare it with what other people are saying to make sure that you are getting the information that is not biased. So that's why we are saying primary information is obtained without bias. The other advantage is that it provides accurate information. It provides accurate information. It provides accurate information which is more reliable. Accurate information, hence more reliable. So if you have gone to the field to source this information by yourself, you can be able to get the correct information. Even when someone tries to give you a wrong information, you can verify it, which is different from the fact whereby you have sent questionnaires through email and someone responds. You don't know how these guys, in which mood were they when they were answering these questions, or what these questions made them feel. Because when you reach there yourself, you can be able to ask additional questions which could be different from what you have typed in the questionnaires, so that you can be able to get more clarity on the information that you are collecting. So since this information is going to be accurate, then it means whoever uses that information is going to make a well-informed decision, or is going to make a good decision because he has received a perfect information. The other advantage is that it gives a provision to the researcher to capture the changes occurring in the course of time. It gives a provision to the researcher to capture the changes, to capture the changes occurring in the course of time. In the course of time. In other words, we get real time information. For example, if maybe I've typed a questionnaire and I have sent it for the respondent to to give me their response or their thoughts about any given topic. These people may take a long time to respond, or even these questionnaires may take long to reach the respondent. So by the time I typed these questions, you may find that what was there at stake is different from what will be there when the respondent is responding to these questionnaires that I typed. So once you go in the field, primary data helps you to capture the things that are trending at the very time that you are in the field. So you are going to get, it gives you a room for you to make changes on the things that are actually happening, or to track changes in real time, because you'll be seeing with your own eyes through observation, because observation is part of the methods that you can use to collect information. So you look at the different things that are happening at the time and be able to adjust your findings. The other last one that we can talk about, it's up to date. It's up to date. It's up to date data, meaning it is relevant. It is going to be relevant and specific to the required product, So when you go to the field, you get an up-to-date information that you have collected in real time. You look at the prevailing conditions and you capture the information that is going to be relevant for the decision that you want to make. If maybe you're looking at how the consumers are consuming a certain product in the market, and you reach there, maybe you have reached at the time of Christmas periods and people are over consuming the product, you may not actually get the good information other than when you go before maybe the Christmas period, whereby you can find people consuming different products given the time that is available. Maybe when people are tired, they end up maybe taking more local boom, more sting, more energy drinks than taking the normal drinks. So it gives you an updated information. So that's all that we can talk about as far as the advantages of primary data are concerned. And now what we are going to look at are the disadvantages. Of course, we know whatever has an advantage, it has a disadvantage. So let's look at the demerits or the disadvantages. Disadvantages of primary data. Now, one of the disadvantages is that it is time consuming. Time consuming to correct. It takes more time for you to collect that information. Remember, you have gone, maybe your sample size, maybe you are doing a survey on the people in Kampala, and maybe you have just started from just one division. Maybe you have started from Nakawa division. You still have Kampala, you have Rubaga. So you find that it will take you more time to complete all the divisions of Kampala district. And if there is no way you are going to say that you have covered in Nakawa, so what is in the Nakawa is the same thing that happens in Kawempe division. No. So you have to cover all different people that are within the different region, even though you have sampled. Because just imagine, I can sample and I say in Kawempe I'm going to interview maybe 10 people, but you take more time interviewing one person, and maybe you have chosen, let's say, 10 people. It will take maybe 10 days for you to collect an interview. But if you had submitted maybe questionnaires for them to fill and send back, when you are not going to involve yourself there by direct questioning these people, then you would save more time. So it is time consuming to collect this information. The other is that it requires skilled researchers. It requires skilled researchers. Not everyone can pick information from the respondents. You can reach there and people keep quiet. Maybe you're asking about, maybe you're doing research about a topic that is too sensitive, maybe poverty levels, and people, they can actually lie to you. Or if you can't connect with them, they may end up not even telling you any information. So it requires skilled people to actually be able to administer the primary data. So it requires skilled researchers in order to administer, in order to be administered. Then the third one is that it needs a bigger sample size in order to be accurate. It needs a bigger sample size. It needs a bigger sample size. In order to be accurate. For example, if I'm going to collect information about poverty levels in Kampala, I have to make sure that if I choose maybe to have maybe these Kampala divisions, the Rubaga, the Nakawa, the Kawempe, to be my sample size, to be my samples, where I'm going to pick the people. For me to pick, if let's say I'm going to pick maybe in the civic division, this is the central division. If I'm going to pick if I'm going to pick people, I can't say I'm going to pick maybe 5 people from the central or the civic division, or I pick 10 people from Kawempe. Kawempe is so big. For you to get a correct information, you can pick like 100 or 200 people in one division. So it means if there are 5 divisions, you are going to have maybe 500 people. Maybe you have picked 100 from each division, and you make sure that even when you're picking from the division, you make sure that the different villages and sub counties are actually covered well, so that you can be able to get a representation of the entire population of Kampala. So it is going to be, it will require, the moment you collect small samples, maybe you collect a sample of 10 people in a division, you are going to mess up. You're not going to get the right information, because the information that you will get may not be accurate. Because most of the times you may fear to go into some locations to get people you are going to interview or to respond to the different questionnaires, and that will make you actually pick people who are close to you, even though they are from the same region, but they will give you an information that is not a representation of the entire information in the division. So you need to have to embrace yourself to capture very many people, to have a good sample size that you can interview for the information to be meaningful. So it requires bigger sample size for it to be accurate. Then the other is that it is difficult to administer because of the large volume of data, which is raw and unprocessed. So it is difficult to administer because of the large volume of data. Because of the large volume of data that is unprocessed, or that is in raw form, For example, if I collect information, maybe I've collected in one parish, I've gotten like maybe 20 people, and they all gave me their information. So if they gave me, maybe if one person gives me maybe a 2-page of information, how about if I cover the entire division of Kampala, let's say an entire division of Kawempe? What is going to happen is that I'm going to have a lot of information that will be hard for me to manage, because all the information is going to be in the raw form, and you need more time to manufacture this information to be presentable. Remember, we said with the statistics, we organize, summarize, classify, present, then we do the analysis and interpretation. So it will be hard for you to manage well, because the information will be very huge. So that's what happens in primary data. Whenever you collect too much information, you may end up not making your own opinion. Actually, you can say, for this information, based of maybe on what I got from the other one, you conclude like this. But you have not gone through the data, or you have not analyzed the data that they have given to you, because the data is so much. Then the last one we can talk about as the disadvantage is on cost. Of course, it is going to be very costly. It is costly. It is costly to collect data using this method. Using this method, and it also takes more time to process. Takes more time to process. So once you have gotten this information, remember, you have to move, you have to put in money to get that information. Some people may even fail to respond to you until you have given them something. Some people may actually give you wrong information because they are not sure about what you are going to do with the information. Just imagine you are collecting about maybe income levels in a given district, let's say Masaka. Some people will actually give you wrong information because they are not sure where you are going to take that information, because you might collect information and you take it maybe to URA. They find themselves being charged that you told us you are earning so much, so pay us taxes. So some people may just give you wrong information just because they are not sure of what you are going to do with the information. So once they give you wrong information, you also make wrong conclusions. So that's all that we can talk about as far as the disadvantages are concerned. But I want us to look at the limitations or the challenges. Limitations. The limitation of primary data itself. So even if you have gotten the information, primary data itself has a problem that it may make the researcher to have his or her own interpretation of the data. You can collect the data so well, but you make your personal judgment on the data that you have collected, maybe depending on which levels of education that you have acquired, maybe based on what you are trying to research about. You end up making your own conclusions. Yes, it happens for primary data, which is not the case for the secondary data, because the secondary data, you always find everything. They have made some conclusions based on evidence, either empirical evidence or operational evidence. So here the researcher may have his or her own interpretation of the data or information gathered So that's basically what we can talk about as far as the types of data are concerned and as far as primary data is concerned. So maybe we can talk about the methods of getting primary data. Methods of getting primary data. I'm just going to highlight or to list the methods, but we are not going to talk about them. We shall talk about them in the preceding videos. One of the methods of collecting primary data, we have questionnaire or what we call questionnaires. We have what we call statistical surveys. The third one, we have direct personal observations, whereby you observe the information by yourself. Personal observations. Then, of course, the last one, we can have interviews. They could be oral, they could be written interviews, but as long as they are interviews. So these are some of the methods that we can use to collect primary data. But one that I want to put more emphasis on is the questionnaire, because we also need to know how can we draft these questionnaires, how can we be able to send, how do we pose the questions so that we don't make the other people get biased about the information, what to tell the respondent for them not to give us biased information, because you may give me a question and I find the question is too personal for me to answer and I end up giving you wrong information. So some of those things that they are the ones, of course, for the personal observation, that one you just go and view all the information by yourself. You make interpretations and analysis by your own self without any person's interference. For the interview, of course, this one you come into contact with another person, you interview them, you ask them a question, they answer. It could be oral, it could be written, either way. But for the surveys, these are mostly done online. You send, maybe you type on your website, you put a survey, just like the way they do reviews. You send it out, let people respond and give you their opinion based on they are mainly objective questions. You send objective, someone just picks A, B, C, D, depending on how they feel about the question that you have posed. So we shall talk about the methods of collection of primary data in some more videos to come, because we also need to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each of the systems. So let's do that in the next video before we talk about the secondary data.